Okay, I wanted to speak to you today about an interesting halakha that some of you may already know. It's really not so much a halakha as it is a minhag. And it has to do with a special honor that we give out at a bris called the sandik. The sandik, as you know, is the man who holds the baby while the baby is having his bris. And it's considered to be the biggest honor that you can give to someone at a bris. It's usually reserved for the baby's grandfather or for a great Rosh Yeshiva, someone who's really a very respectable person, who's very close with the family. Usually we're trying to get a holy person to do it, or a grandfather, and so forth. What makes being a sandik such a special thing? There is a very interesting statement in my Rabbi of blessed memory, Rabbi Yoseph, who taught me how to be a moil, came out with a series of books called Otsar HaBris. It's sort of like an encyclopedia on bris milah. And in volume 2 of his work, he quotes a lot of sources for the different customs of why we do what we do at a bris. And so if you take a look, he quotes from the Maharil, which is one of the earliest Ashkenazic halachic authorities going all the way back to the early 16th century. And he writes, the Maharil kasav de gedola mitzvahs bal bris sandik mi mitzvahs amoil. But it's an even greater mitzvah to be the sandik than it is to be the moil himself. Mipnei shiraglav nidmu lamizbeach. And the Maharil says, because the legs of the sandik, the lap of the sandik that's holding the baby, is like you're the base of the altar. Ki'ilu maktir ketores lashamayim. And therefore, when the sandik is holding the baby, it is as if he is offering incense up to heaven. So here you have this concept of offering incense being compared to is what you're doing when you're holding the baby, and by having him have his bris, it's sort of like offering incense. Now, what in the world is the connection between being a sandik and offering incense? I mean, if you were going to make some kind of sacrificial analogy to a bris, and you were going to say that the person holding the baby is like the altar, I would have said that you're more like offering an animal sacrifice, because there's blood here. You know, b'damai chayi, by your blood shall you live. This is sort of a blood sacrifice. This is not an incense sacrifice. You're not burning anything to Hashem. You're offering, you're causing a blood sacrifice to God. So why should that be? And what does it have to do with the fragrance of incense? Now, he says, with Birkei Yosef, another early halachic commentator says, Matsasi b'Tosfos, he says, I found in a Tosfos commentary, he says that yesh b'medrash tam sheyesh litcho ka'adam atzmo liot bal bris sandik, that there's a reason why a person should try to insert himself to become a sandik at a bris. Lefi shedonmeh osa mitzvah leketoret, because the mitzvah of being the sandik is like the mitzvah of offering the ketoris in the temple. Kedamrinan b'shah shemal Avraham avinu et atzmo vet b'nei veto, as it's brought down that when Avraham circumcised himself and the members of his family, Yorad HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'sham, Hashem came down. Amru lo malachei hasharet malacha lifnot el givat ha'arelot. So the angels say to God, God, we don't understand. Like, why are you so interested in this very physical act to go down to the plain of foreskins, which is the name of the place where Yehoshua, when he first came into Israel with the Jewish people, he circumcised thousands, tens of thousands of males who had not been circumcised, who had been born in the desert. He says, Kolomar makom metunafu. Basically, the angels were arguing, God, this is a dirty place. This is a place of feh. Why would you want to have anything to do with a place where just pieces of skin are being discarded? So Amar lahem chaviva malai kikatoris. God responds to him and says, this act of circumcision is as beloved to me as the offering of the ketoris. And how do I know this? The V'chad Korach kesiv givat ha'arelot. One pasuk in Yehoshua calls the plain of foreskins. V'chad kesiv givat ha'levona. And another place in Shir HaShirim, it calls it givat ha'levona, which is the plain of the frankincense. The Elfinan mehadadi, and we learn one from the other. Again, very bizarre connection. What's the connection between offering the incense and performing the mitzvah of Brit Milah, especially holding the baby when you're doing a bris. It doesn't seem to make any sense. But by the way, there is a very important halachic ramification to this. It's brought down by the Maharil and by others that a person should only be the sandak for one family once in his life. And this is an important minhag that is practiced widely today. So if, let's say, you have Zayde or Saba was the sandak for one of your children, he should not be the sandak for any of your other sons. And the reason is because the Gemara says that the offerer of Ketores, the person, the Kohen that was chosen to burn the incense on a daily basis in the temple, could only do it once in his entire lifetime. Why could you only do it once in your lifetime? Because it was a skula for ashirut, because there was a blessing that God gave to anyone who offered the incense, that if you offered it, you would become wealthy. And because we wanted to share the wealth, we want all the Kohanim to have this opportunity to be able to offer the incense once in their life. Once you'd offered the Ketores once, you couldn't offer it ever again. They used to do a lottery every morning to designate which Kohen would be in charge of which job in the temple. But you had to recuse yourself if you had already offered the Ketores once, you couldn't offer it again, ever again. So similarly, if you've already been the sandak for a particular family, you're not allowed to be the sandak ever again for that family. That's a minhag. Now, of course, can be certain exceptions to the rule, which you can ask your shaila at the time, but that's the basis of this. So I'd like to discuss why the Ketores plays a role in the issue of the sandak, why it's compared to being a sandak, and what it has to do with our parsha, Parshas Korach. If you take a look, there's something very strange that Moshe Rabbeinu does when he is challenged by Korach. And there's a whole band of men that join with Korach to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu's authority. What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He says, take these 250 distinguished rabbinic figures who are joining you, Korach, and challenging me, and have them join me at the tent of meeting, have them join me at the Mishkan, and each one of these 250 men should take a censer pan, should take a pan, fill it with incense, and burn it before Hashem, and see if Hashem accepts their offering. This is going to be the test to see if really Hashem wants you or not. Now, Moshe was really being sincere, and you know that Moshe was being sincere because after Moshe presents to them this test, he turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says, please don't accept their incense. In other words, really Moshe's concerned. He says, Hashem, if really this is your will, that what Korach is right, and he feels that we need to democratize and decentralize the authority of the Jewish people, then I'm perfectly willing to do it. But I don't think that he's right. And I think that would be detrimental to Klal Yisrael to decentralize, especially because I'm the giver of the Torah. But chas v'sholom, if this is your will, Hashem, thy will be done. And therefore, let's see what happens. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, if this is the way Hashem wants it, fine. Well, we know what happened. The Torah says at the very end of Perek Tezayin in Parshas Korach, what happens is after Korach gets swallowed up by the earth, almost immediately afterwards, these men are standing by the tent of meeting with their censer pans, and the Torah writes, "Ve'esh yotza me'es Hashem," a fire comes down from heaven, "Vatochal esach hamishim u'masayim ish makrivei haketoras," and a fire consumes all 250 men who were offering the ketores. Now, that may not have been Moshe's original plan. Moshe was simply just wanted to know whether Hashem was going to accept their ketores or not. He didn't, but Hashem wanted to show Moshe, no, Moshe, you're being too humble. In other words, what these people have been doing is not only an affront to you, it's an affront to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as well, because their intentions are not l'shem shamayim. Their intentions are for their own self-aggrandizement, and they want to be able to become leaders and become important people. And so this is what happens. The question that I have for you is, why did Moshe choose the vehicle of testing these men by having them offer ketores? What is it about the incense, per se, specifically the incense, that Moshe felt would be an appropriate way of testing these people to see if they were sincere? And that's why I'm asking this question about the sandak. I want to point out something quite fascinating. There's an anomaly if you look at the Torah reading when in the book of Shemos, when we talk about the construction of the Mishkan. all of the different klei HaMishkan, all of the different utensils of the Mishkan are itemized in which parsha? Anyone remember which parsha that appears in? Parshas Truma. And in Tetzaveh it talks about the priestly garments. At the end of Parshas Tetzaveh, after a discussion of the klei HaMishkan are completely finished, and then we go into the topic of the Kohanim and what garments they're supposed to wear and what karbanos they're supposed to bring to be inaugurated into their service, the Torah has like one last paragraph in Parshas Tetzaveh, and it talks about the inner altar for the purpose of offering ketores. And it's completely out of place. It should have been the whole discussion of building an incense altar, the golden altar for offering the incense, should have been listed together with all of the other klei HaMishkan. And yet it's not. It's shtucked all the way in the back of all of these different stories. And we don't know why that is. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, in the Guide for the Perplexed, tells us why. And I have it for you in English because there's no convention in the Hebrew of the Moreh Nevuchim. You know that the Moreh Nevuchim was written in Arabic. So there's no reason for us to break our teeth over it in Hebrew, because we'd just be reading a translation. So if we're reading a translation, we might as well read it in the language that we understand to begin with. So he writes as follows. This is in Moreh Nevuchim, section 3, or chapter 45. And the Rambam writes as follows. He says, since many beasts were daily slaughtered in the holy place, the flesh cut in pieces and the entrails and the legs burnt and washed, the smell of the place would undoubtedly have been like the smell of slaughterhouses if nothing had been done to counteract it. They were therefore commanded to burn incense there twice every day, in the morning and in the evening, in order to give the place and the garments of those who officiated there a pleasant odor. There is a well-known saying of the sages, in Jericho they could smell the incense burnt in the temple. This provision likewise tended to support the dignity of the temple. If there had not been a good smell, let alone if there had been a stench, it would have produced in the minds of the people the reverse of respect. For our heart generally feels elevated in the presence of good odor and is attracted by it, but it abhors and avoids bad smell. So I assume that there's going to be at Sobeys a run on deodorizers now at the supermarket, right? Because but what is it? It's derech eretz that after you go out of the bathroom, you spray it, right? When you leave the bathroom. In other words, it's proper to not want to have, if you want to create a respectable environment, a place of kavod for Hashem, you don't want it to smell like dead animals that have been rotting in the sun. And so the purpose of offering the ketores was different for the Rambam from everything else that was done in the Beis HaMikdash. Everything else that was done in the Beis HaMikdash was what we call avoda. It was called a way of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is how we serve God. We offer animals in the service to Hashem. What was the purpose of burning ketores once in the morning and once in the evening? That's not to serve Hashem. That's to create honor for Hashem, that people should not feel, I got to go to the Beis HaMikdash and smell that terrible smell again. No, burn the incense so that the fragrance of the ketores will give people a good feeling when they come into the Beis HaMikdash. Now there are other, the Rambam is not alone in this. The Rambam is perhaps the most rational to the extreme, but there are other Rishonim, the Ramban and the Sforno, say very similar concepts, that this was lichvod Hashem, that it was not an avoda per se, it was not a way of serving God, but it was to show honor to God, that you want to create a lovely fragrance in your efforts of serving Hashem over the course of the day. Now, if what the Rambam is saying is correct, then it turns out that the offering of the ketores was not offered to Kohanim, that it was because it was such a great honor that the Kohanim were clamoring to offer the ketores. If you had your choice, you're a Kohen working in the Beis HaMikdash, and it's your day. You didn't get to work every day. You know, the Kohanim, there were thousands upon thousands of Kohanim in every generation, so there were limited activities for you to do in the Beis HaMikdash on a daily basis. You only got called up to work in the temple usually twice a year, was standard quota if you were living in the Second Temple era. So you didn't get a chance to work every day. You got a chance to work twice a year, and then you had to take lots as to what job you were going to do. So if you had an option of ascending the altar to perform one of the libations, or to slaughter and collect the blood and sprinkle the blood on the altar, or you had the option of going and spritzing the room deodorizer. What would you choose to do? What would you choose to do? Do you do the Febreze, right? Or are you gonna do something substantial, like really cooking for Hashem and serving Hashem? Which job would you choose? So it doesn't seem like, from the way that the Rambam and the other Rishonim are describing it, that this was the most preferred avoda. It was probably the least preferred form of avoda. Now, if that's the case, then I think that we have perhaps a theory as to why Chazal really play up this idea of Ketores. The reason why Chazal want to emphasize how you could become wealthy through the offering of the Ketores is because they want to provide an incentive to the Kohanim and say, you know what? Don't abstain from the possibility of offering the Ketores. Offering the Ketores can make you wealthy. It's a great opportunity. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will enrich you. But understand why HaKadosh Baruch Hu enriches you. Those people who don't desire kavod for themselves, but rather want to do whatever Hashem wants for me. I'm not interested in getting the most important job. I'm interested in doing whatever Hashem decides I should do. Do you understand? So what's the reward for such a person? Those who belittle themselves, HaKadosh Baruch Hu elevates. And so if you say to yourself, it's not important which job I do. I don't have to be the big kahuna that's going to go on top of the Mizbeach and offer the biggest carbon and the most important job, and everyone will hoist me on their shoulders and say I was the hero for the day. I don't mind being the deodorizer Kohen. Yeah? If that's what Hashem wants for me, if that's the job that Hashem chooses for me, then that's the job I'll do, because everything that Hashem gives to me is holy. And if that's the job that you say, if that's your attitude, then you deserve to be elevated, because Hashem loves those who humble themselves. And if that's the case, so then it would seem to me that that's the reason why being a sandik is, for the Maharil, just like offering the Ketores. Because what is a sandik? Sandik doesn't get to do the cut. He doesn't get to make the bracha. There's no words for him to say. He's just sitting there and holding the baby's legs. He's basically nothing more than a glorified leg clamp for the moil to hold the baby down while he does what he's supposed to do. Yes? So one could think, well, then what's the big deal of being a sandak? You know what the big deal is? It's more important than being a moil. The moil is the hero of the day. He's the guy that gets to do all the important work. But the sandak, who's just sitting there passively and holding the baby, is the person who's like the maktir, the Ketores. He has the humble job. He has the work that not everyone feels is the most important thing, and it's dafka because of that we make it so important. Now let's go to our parsha. You know why Moshe Rabbeinu chooses Korach's men? He tells them, let's have you offer the Ketores. It's for one simple reason. Your whole argument was that you're not in this for yourselves. Your challenge to Moshe Rabbeinu is not because you feel that you should be entitled to some leadership role as well, but rather your statement is Ki chol ha'eda kulam kedoshim u'v'sacham Hashem. The whole congregation is holy, and in their midst, God is in everyone's midst. U'madua tisnasu al kahal Hashem. So why should you, Moshe? It's not right for you to lord over us. We're all holy. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Azoi. Okay, that's an interesting argument. But let's see if it holds true. If you're truly l'shem shamayim, if you're truly virtuous in your objective, and you're truly altruistic in your feelings that it's necessary for everyone to share equally the role of serving Hashem and sharing the duties of leadership within the Jewish people, then let's see if that holds true. Let's have you offer Ketores. Ketores, which is not the most important job, which is the most menial of the tasks in the Beis HaMikdash. And let's see if Hashem detects that spirit of humility that is required of the person that is maktir the Ketores, that brings Ketores. And if you can do that, then that'll be a sign that you are l'shem shamayim, and that really it's been a mistake all along for me to hoard the power to just one or two people. But what HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides is no. that the Maktir Ketores that requires that sense of humility does not need to be incinerated himself. He is himself already self-effacing and humble and does not need to be brought down in his stature. The very fact that God incinerated them instead of their Ketores is a sign that they did possess within them already this sense of greatness and importance and self-aggrandizement that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says is not appropriate for someone who's going to be the leader of the Jewish people. And that's dafka why he chose that. You know, there's a Medrash in Medrash Rabbi that says when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, it says, V'chol Adam lo yihiyeh ba'oel moed. That no one is allowed to be in the Holy of Holies when Aharon enters into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. So the Medrash asks the question, it's in Medrash Rabbah, the end of the 21st chapter of Vayikra. And it asks the question, Amar Rabba Vahu, V'kohen Gadol lo Adam hayah? What do you mean no man can be in the Holy of Holies when Aaron is in there? What about the Kohen Gadol himself? He himself is a man. So how can you tell me that no man can be there if the Kohen Gadol himself is a man? And so the Medrash answers that when the Kohen Gadol would walk into the Holy of Holies, he wasn't a man anymore. He was an angelic being. The Avnei Nezer explained that what that means is not so much that he became holy, but that he completely nullified all sense of ego, all sense of self when he walked into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And what the Torah is saying when it says, V'chol Adam lo yihiyeh ba'ol moed, that no man, no human being, no ego can be in the Holy of Holies, is that if you're going to be successful in your endeavors for the Jewish people on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, when you have to achieve atonement for them, you cannot have any sense of self. You have to be completely nullified of any sense of self in order to be able to be successful. And that's an important lesson for us. We have to remember that in our endeavors to help the Jewish people and to be there for Klal Yisrael, we have to want to say, I'm willing to offer the Ketores. Like, you know, if there's a committee that's forming and everyone's given a job, right? You can't say, well, I'm only going to do it if I'm the co-chair. I'm only going to do it if, if I'm the head person on the project. Because that's not what a Maktir Ketores is. A Maktir Ketores is a person who says, if I'm just the person who spritzes the Febreze, then I'll do it. Because if that's what you need in order to help the Jewish people, then it's worth it for me to do that as well. That's the lesson that we're supposed to take out of Korach and his men. Yes, you had a question, sorry.
So how does that tie in the fact that the Avodah Yom Kippur, the Kohen goes into the Kodesh HaKodashim, and it's Maktir Ketores?
It's the very same idea of the Kohen Gadol going in, because we are submitting ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ketores itself represents the whole idea of self-nullification. That we are here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just to serve you. That's what the Ketores represents. That's a representation of what the Ketores is during the rest of the year. And by the way, that's not the only function of the Ketores. One could argue that the Ketores on Yom Kippur is to create that cloud, which is a representation of the Shekhinah, because it says that the Ketores would form a cloud, and there was the cloud of the descent of the Shekhinah, and perhaps what we're trying to do is trying to recreate that sense of Shekhinah descending within the Jewish people on Yom Kippur as well. But I think the message of the Ketores being that idea of self-nullification, that's also very relevant for Yom Kippur as well. Complete submission to Hashem.
It also seems to be very important on the other hand as well, the fact that he did it in Kodesh.
Absolutely, because the time of the greatest humility has to be when we are closest to Hashem. Yes?
The fact that they are made of gold kind of contradicts the idea. Another one is made out of wood, I understand.
Copper. It was copper.
Copper.
The original Mishkan, in the original Mishkan, the outer altar was copper, and the inner altar was gold. The gold is really to atone for, or to sort of counteract the sin of the egel, sin of the golden calf. But the actual items that were used in the construction of the temple had to be majestic. But the avoda that we did in the temple had to be with a sense of self-effacement. Okay? So everyone have a great day, and we'll see a great summer.